For the last number of newsletters, I've been very intrigued on the long side with owning stocks that are involved in mining of silver along with gold, but heavy in silver. And three of those stocks that we like very much are Coeur Mining, symbol CDE, First Majestic, symbol AG, and Avino Silver, symbol ASM. And I'm going to recommend them again for some new news, and that has to do with a famous fort in Kentucky. We're talking about Fort Knox. The last time that the amount of gold that the United States possesses, including that in Fort Knox, was audited was back in the Eisenhower administration. And so it remained for many decades, largely, in my opinion, because the U.S. government policy since the Nixon administration has been to kind of suppress interest in gold as a type of money and instead try to focus on the U.S. dollar as the source of money. Increasingly, though, and largely because you can read often in the newsletter, the great analyst Alistair McLeod recommends that really no piece of paper, even as august as the US dollar, is money. Instead, it's credit to piece of paper. The only real money in Alistair McLeod's focus is gold. And since January 1 of 2023, the central banks of the world have agreed with that by promoting, if you will, a new member of the class of first-tier assets, which had been only one US dollar denominated treasury bonds. Now gold is also a first-tier asset. And since that time, we've had an increasing in general bull market increase in the price of gold. We're hitting new all-time highs. And the same is getting close to with the case of silver, although in the case of silver, the move has not been to an all-time high, but it's still been a strong bull market. And so in that scenario, it's interesting to see things like what's happening to a potential audit in Fort Knox, because one of my favorite U.S. senators, Rand Paul, recently has talked to Elon Musk, the head of Doge, about doing such an audit, appropriately questioning, does the U.S. really have the gold that they claim they have in Fort Knox? Elon Musk totally appropriately said, well, this is of interest. And most important, President Trump recently announced that he will go to Fort Knox. Not only will he go to Fort Knox, but he will go to Fort Knox to find out what in fact is the case. How much gold does the U.S. government own and control in Fort Knox, as well, of course, as the other two locations, such as in New York City, where U.S. government claims to hold gold. This, in my mind, is another reason why buying Coeur Mining or AG or ASM, the silver miners that we like, makes sense. There's a number of situations, and obviously this situation about Fort Knox being audited is just one example, where probably the most important example is that you have almost daily new all-time record high prices on gold. Gold is in a major bull market, and it makes it more difficult, in my opinion, for the U.S. government or the Federal Reserve, etc., to suppress interest in buying gold as an alternative to buying dollars. And of course, the biggest reason for that is that the U.S. government every week in their treasury auctions has to find a home for over $100 billion of treasury securities, And the only way they can find the home in the final analysis is to pay the interest rate that the buyers are willing to pay. It used to be called, under the Clinton administration, the bond market vigilantes. And up to now, in the last 2 or 3 months, the interest rate that you have to pay for the critical 10-year T-bond has bounced around 4.5, 4.75%. If in fact, though, those interest rates were to go up and the amount of money that the Treasury could raise would have to pay higher interest rates, that could also be an important factor of the idea that what we also know from other sources, which is so many of the foreign central banks, particularly China and Russia, are buying gold by selling their treasury bonds, U.S. treasury bonds. The same could happen in other countries. And that, of course, is another source of demand for silver and for gold, and therefore a reason why, once again, you might want to take a look at buying a little of the silver miners that we take a look at. And if you wanted to get more information about that, you can do that by going into the archive of our newsletter where we've talked about these various interests.